Welcome back, my first step ever ninjas. With every episode, we are having some really reputed, amazing, and experienced business leaders, owners, professionals on my first ever podcast. And today, if I may say so, I have the godfather of digital marketing industry, and I think you will agree with me when you come to know how much this man has really done in this space, and he has gained so much of knowledge and expertise. So before I take you through what all he has done, which I will, but please let me welcome Mark Cameron. Mark, hi. It is my pleasure
Hey
to
guys.
have you on my first ever podcast.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, really happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me along.
So, Mark, you are a strategist, keynote speaker, media commentator, advisor. This is all what your LinkedIn says. But I think
Yeah.
the time I met you, I heard you speak as you were one of the panelists at Australian Marketing Institute recently, and you were talking a lot about Martech, which is
Yep.
marketing and technology. Something really interesting, something, it's not something new, but it has been in this space. But I think this is a space which will be really interesting for the aspiring leaders, graduates, anyone who really wants to build a personal brand, and I think much more than that. So I think I would like to first dive into asking the first question: how did you step into the Martech world?
That's a long story. So, yeah, I started my career in advertising in New Zealand in the sort of the 90s. So, advertising marketing. Then when worked for a large, kind of one of the first big kind of digital agencies in New Zealand. That's again late 90s, early 2000s. Um, and yeah, so by the end of sort of 2000, I felt like I needed to head overseas. And I was planning on coming to Australia for a short period of time and then heading off to New York. I had a job lined up there, but he came over here in 2001, and then September 11 happened. And that job that I, had lined up in New York sort of ceased to exist. And I was sort of doing a lot of freelancing work here. So I was doing work with Telstra and Heinz Waddies and Toyota and those kinds of things here. So then in about 2003, I joined the company I'm with now. By 2007, I'd sort of taken the business over and restructured it, and took it from sort of more of a branding comms business to becoming a digital agency initially, and then a sort of digital consultancy. So more on the marketing side of things. That was really as social media was starting to scale. Marketing automation was starting to become a thing. Search engine optimization was really starting to become a thing. And then we then moved the business into becoming more of a management consultancy focused on digital transformation space, and that's really where we are now. So do a lot of work in government sectors, do a lot of work with companies like Telstra, do a lot of work with healthcare providers and universities across Australia and across the world, and have been involved in all sorts of weird things like presidential elections and a whole bunch of interesting things along the journey. So yeah.
Yeah, that is a really a big gamut of and actually amalgamation of different industries that I see that you apply your own knowledge of Martech that you have created in the past, I think over 2 decades. So you have really seen how the space of marketing has changed, and how technology has really got a grip over marketing. Maybe it's marketing over technology. I don't know what it is, and maybe that's what we're getting into today.
Yeah, it's sort of I think a lot of what we do is look at technology and marketing and customer and how it's impacting business models broadly, like how whole organizations or whole industries are actually starting to shift, and the role of marketing within that, the role of technology within that, and then the role of other disciplines and so on as well. So that's really, yeah, that's a big part of what we do.
So that's really interesting over here. Like I also really get really interested in knowing if someone has their own venture, which you have. You're the CEO of W3 Digital, and I would
Yep.
really like to know, like out of curiosity, if W3 stands for something.
Well, yeah, it stood for when the business first started up. It was called Working Three, and there was sort of three partners who so it's taken over. But we sort of shortened it to W3. because we were a digital consultancy, digital transformation organization, and it really felt like that, sort of that dub. The beginning of websites was much more of kind of that the focus of the business than where we were heading. So it was really about those three W's at the beginning of every web address.
Wow, that's interesting to know. Good to know that how things evolve and how people really take things forward and make their
Yeah.
own. So over here,
We also, sorry, just I was going to say, there's, we also sort of use that three idea and the W3 thing to sort of start to think about where we position and what we do in the market, and really the area that we sit is in between organizational risk and opportunity. So that's strategy and board level conversation, the the human aspect, so the organizational structure and customer piece, and then the technology enablement, and we kind of sit in the middle of those three aspects and actually make those elements work.
it's interesting that you touched upon this particular aspect because that is where I was really getting into. Being a recent graduate myself, and having a lot of friends in business field, and a lot of us really would like to understand a lot about consultancy. And I see that you come from management consultancy, and it's all about heavily into this, specifically into digital. So, if you
Yeah,
would like to really take us through, because you are an expert in experience economy, I just read about it, which was really
yeah,
interesting term, and I see that's what Lego is, how Lego really operates on. Maybe you can
yeah.
take us through, in a brief summary of the way that you can, how things really operate, and what aspiring leaders or graduates who are really coming in should be really, keeping abreast with now these days.
Yeah, that's a kind of a big question.
Okay.
um, so I
Happy
think,
for you to start. Yeah.
so if you think about experience economy, so experience economy is sort of where it's a lot to do with how the progression of there's an element within inside the experience economy framework which talks about progression of economic value. So when it comes to a consumer buying something, you've got essentially stuff you dig out of the ground initially. So the basic commodity stuff. Then you've got goods, which are basically a combination of those things turned into something new. Then you've got services that sometimes go along with the goods, but sometimes don't. Then you've got experiences, and there's been a lot of talk about, obviously, about the value of experiences and businesses becoming more human-centered and experience-focused. And then we've got transformations. So, and that's where the customer actually will buy a series of goods and services and expect to be transformed. So, a university degree is a really good example of that. Buying something that may help you lose weight, or a program that helps you lose weight is a good example of that. Um, and I think the more businesses, the more they think about their service offering and how they work, can move up that value chain. But at the same time, the market is always wanting to push the product down that value chain. So when something can get in today's environment, something can get commoditized very, very, very quickly, and that's basically what it means. It's moving down that value chain. So that's one. That's kind of like one aspect. And then when you sort of talk about how things sort of work, I mean that kind of big. I think the big issue is currently looking at is how markets are shifting, like whole markets. How are they starting to shift, and how businesses that have been set up for a very, very long time to extract value out of a really good idea they had a long time ago, and that's structured processes, structured ways of working, very, very very hierarchical structures, for example, that no longer is valid, or it's starting to lose relevance very, very quickly. And I think that understanding that and understanding where your role within inside of that shift is where a graduate will start to start to create huge value for themselves and value for the company they work.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting, and it's, as you mentioned, it's not that easy to understand. Coming from background of marketing, I think it
Mm,
takes me a while to understand. On paper, yes, you understand, but when you really start applying, it takes time. So I think
yeah,
because we have graduates from all walks of life, getting back into the digital aspect of things,
sure.
if everyone wants, because I think today everyone wants to have their own personal brand, even if
Yep.
they're not into marketing, but this has become a really important thing, if not essential, I would say. And if you would like to give maybe top 3 tips to graduates from different walks of life, like how in digital world right now, what are the 3 steps that they can take, which is definitely easy, but it is also essential for them to keep at it.
Um, Look, when it came to my personal brand, so my personal brand started, I mean, a long time ago, but when you talk about media commentator, right? I started doing some blogging myself, was collecting thoughts, and then moving into, then started writing for a couple of magazines, and then I had BRW and the Fin Review asked me to do some work, and then that became a kind of a regular column, and I ended up writing hundreds and hundreds of articles for lots of different magazines. Um, but the one thing that drove that, and it was really really simple, um, is just real active listening. Um, so thinking about, so talking to lots of people, asking questions, and then hearing the questions they have, and then thinking about, well, how can I answer that? And then really just thinking about. Initially, it was writing blog pieces, but now quite often it's just writing very very short LinkedIn posts. I've got an interesting question. I let it sort of sit in my head for a couple of days, and then I'll try and respond to it publicly on LinkedIn, and that positions you as a thought leader
Mhm.
in some particular area, and it's probably one of the best branding things you can do. It's better, it's more effective than sort of trying to go too many channels too quickly. It's just try and develop reputation and influence.
Yeah, I think that sounds really, really great. And that's what we've been emphasizing for a very long period, that you need to make a small start.
Mm.
And that's how everything, really comes into picture. It takes time. And I think with digital world, we really, really want everything to happen quickly, but that takes a lot of time. I think starting small is the basis of everything. With you, Mark, I would like to ask you, has there ever been an incident, where being in this digital world that has really sucked the life out of you, or maybe you're so passionate about it that you don't, that really never bothers you? Something that has,
Oh look,
yeah.
I mean, running a business is hard. It's hard work, but um, I think when an organization or a relationship is focused way too much on the digital tactics and not thinking about, so they want to do lots of stuff. They want to do, get marketing automation going. They want to do lots and lots of social media posts. They want to do, it's just about volume and activity rather than actually having a really clear strategy. That can be really disheartening
Mhm.
because, they're missing the big opportunity, which is to do one thing incredibly, incredibly well, incredibly, incredibly creatively. And it may not be any of those things when it comes to digital. Doing one thing really well can completely change the business. So I think that's yeah, it can become disheartening when people don't, people can't see that and are very very caught up in just the small tactical things.
Yes, and I think it's not really that easy to run a business, as you just mentioned, and that there are a lot of things that really keeps you, on your toes, and more often it is your own internal strength, your internal mind, and your health. So, what is that you do? If you have a schedule or something that you follow that really helps you be, on your toes and just give your 100% in whatever you do.
Look, oh man, it's hard. I've got two
What
young
if you
kids,
don't
so
follow at all?
yeah, having too much of a schedule with two kids under under 8 is quite hard. But look, I mean, pretty much my whole career, I've tried to get up reasonably early, go for a walk for at least an hour or so, listen to podcasts, give myself time to think um, before sort of jumping into meetings and conversations for the rest of the day. I think that I found that to be very, very, very helpful, um, and, and also just making time, allowing time for sort of creative input. So knowing that you have to actually carve time out of your week every week to actually do the writing that you want to do, or do some bit of work, or give yourself this time to learn and think and develop, rather than just filling your entire week with lots and lots and lots of sort of activity, which is really good. Like, you do have to do those things, but if you're not making time for you to develop yourself, then it doesn't really, you get burnt out pretty quick.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking us through your journey. I just have one last question, and I think it's a little, for me, it's interesting, and I'm curious to know. What do you think are the top three mistakes, or maybe even top one mistake that in your journey you have seen the brands make in the digital
Hmm.
space?
Uh, Probably the top mistake is to spend too much on technology too soon, and not have a really good strategy about what they're doing. So spend too much on data collection, maybe, or a CRM or a marketing automation, and not really understanding why they're doing it. And they end up spending huge amounts of money with not really the output, or the sort of outcomes they're looking for, or sometimes the actually has a damaging impact on their brand. So I think that's one of the things, is giving an organization time to think about, what are we really going to do when it comes to digital, what suits our brand, what suits our market, how do we think about digital as not just not a way of taking spend away from traditional media and moving it over to a new form, but actually use it in a way it's best. You can generate value, or you can generate conversation. You can have applications, whatever else it may be, that's going to draw you much closer to your customer and your brand.
Now, I think that really makes a lot of sense, even in this way. Like, if I put it in a way, like, this is also synonymous to students, graduates who are trying to build their personal brand. I think even if
Mm,
you just start, posting things on
yeah.
different platforms without having your reasoning why, as you just mentioned, that brands just
Mm,
in technology a lot without knowing the reason, without having the end outcome, or it not being seamless, because if you're using the same content on different platform, how they marry together, I think that also works very well on a personal brand level as well for graduates. So thank you so
yeah.
much. I mean, that is my takeaway. That was really
Yeah. Yeah.
interesting to hear that. So
I
thank
was
you.
just going to say one. Well, I was actually just having a conversation. I do some mentoring, and I had a conversation with some of the other mentors. And we're talking about preparing, how do people prepare their resume, how they think about their personal brand. And one of the things that sort of came up in that conversation was, um, and for me anyway, some of the employees that I've had that have impressed me the most are the ones that have thought have obviously thought very clearly about what I need and what our business needs, rather than just trying to write a resume, or write their personal brand based on what they want. So they've even gone and talked to other people in the business, try to understand the culture, and when they've put their cover letter forward, or their resume forward, or they've done their research. And I think that those are the types of things that really, really, really shine through. Not hard to do. It's not a lot of time, but it can have a massive impact, and and last in people's minds for a long time.
Mark, I think that's a very good direction for anyone to, start even thinking of before they craft their cover letter or resume. I think it always comes down to what value you are going to add, and
Yeah,
that really increases your value in other people's eyes, because this is something that you're doing as a team. You are going there to be part of a team, and you're not just working for yourself. So I think that was a really great perspective to share with all our listeners today. So thank you, Mark, for taking us through your journey of being in the Martech space, giving us a glimpse about the experience economy, which is a really deep thought, I think, and then also
yeah,
taking us through what our graduates can really do in this digital world. So, thank you so much. And before my guest speakers leave, I always ask them to leave our listeners with a thought or a quote that they really resonate with and follow through. So, if you would like to leave some.
Oh, look, I mean, the one quote is is the one thing that my father said to me a very, very long time ago, which is, be spend time to understand what your strengths are, and then surround yourself with people who have strengths in your weaknesses.
Wow.
and then life will be good.
Wow, that was interesting. Okay, thank you, Mark. Thank you so much for being on my first step ever, our 31st episode, and really, really, spilling the golden seeds and helping our listeners take that one step further towards their journey. Thank